Oh, great. And so welcome back, everybody here in person, and welcome to those who are joining us on Zoom. So we're now opening the open session of our two-day symposium on digital futures of Central Asia. So just to let everyone here know, we are broadcasting the session on Zoom, and we're also recording it. So we organized this symposium to really have a discussion about the digital future that is coming at us faster than we expected. And we heard yesterday and earlier today very different perspectives from national perspectives, education, small businesses, infrastructure, to a more regional perspective. Is there a Central Asia joint digital future? How does the cooperation in this field works? How do geopolitical events and alliances play out in internet connectivity? And now we're on to our last session, where we're very lucky to hear a variety of speakers giving us a taste of, again, this very different perspectives. And of course, we'll end with a great keynote speech. I'm really looking forward to that, no pressure, in about an hour and a half. So we get started with Mr. Bayan Konirbayev, who's the Chief Digital Officer of Almaty City and the Director of the Digitalization Department. So he's going to talk about the digital government and I think a perspective from the nitty-gritty of how these things work in practice, not just in theory. Please.
It's really a big honor for me to be here today. It's really a big honor for me to meet a lot of people from really different backgrounds with a lot of experience and basic understanding of the development of digital Silk Road. Because what I want to mention is like when we're talking about the digital Silk Road, we are talking not about just one initiative. We're talking about opportunity, which covers not only Kazakhstan, not only Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, or Uzbekistan, or other countries. We're talking about the whole region. And today you really mentioned that it's really important in the sense that behind every country, behind every documents, behind every memorandums, there is always people who are really starving for new services, for new environment, convenient and comfortable environment. So apart of that, what I want to mention through the perspective of the development of digital government is the focus of the local government. Because I, as the CDO, really represent the Smart Almaty strategy. And today I want to just say something about things we've done here. I think it's not working. Yep. No. Is it okay if I'll tell you next slide, next slide?
The practical challenges of digital.
Yeah. Okay. So Almaty city has more than 2 million inhabitants, like 3 million with the metropolitan area. We had more than 14.5 million services provided online in 2022. And currently 94% of all government services are available online and on mobile. And more than 11.5 million hospital visits in the last year being arranged through online platform. So the basic understanding is that the city like Almaty city will never be able to be controllable if we will not have any digital instruments. And when we're talking about the digital government itself, we're talking about very specific customized solution for every citizen. So what is really important is that you see, like 10 or 20 years ago, especially during post-Soviet Union time, especially in the beginning of the post-Soviet Union time, people was like, if they will be able to get any service, they was really happy. Even though they need to spend about 10 to 15 hours in queue, even though they need to find some connected person in the government, even though they need to arrange something very specific and bring special presents. It was always like, if you will get service, it will be okay. But it's not like this now. Why? Because through the development of digitalization, we had the project, we had a program called Digital Kazakhstan that we have a new one. But thanks to the development of digitalization, now we have the choice. We see how affordable digital services become. You can use Kaspi, you can use Halik Bank, a lot of mobile applications, and they're very affordable for everybody. And thanks to this, a lot of people think that actually they really need a very good service provided online. And the demand for online service, it's not just online service with a chatbot or something else, but something which they will be able to control and make SLA agreement, like service level agreements. They need to get a qualified solution with a qualified service. So qualified service, of course, will come with some level of customization, because if this service is for everybody, it means that probably 50% of these people will not be happy with the service. That is the reason why we as a city started to move with proactive services. Proactive services especially focus on digital inclusion. Digital inclusion, it means like smart city for all, for everybody, no matter what kind of solutions, environment, level of education, level of wealth you'll be able to have. And of course, we need to understand how we're going to manage that kind of source of information in order to monitor the system. So in Almaty system, in Almaty city, we developed the kind of unified video surveillance systems, which we are actually really proud of, because it's not just a safety solution, but it's something which we will be able to use to control the city. Based on geospatial data, remote control, heat maps, track objects, and etc. Another point is the development of the unified data warehouse. We call it Almaty Data Lake. And the basic idea is control all the data through the data correlation analysis. So you see not only the data for today, but you'll be able to see how much the situation changed in 2-3 years, in 1-2 days, in 2-3 hours. And this is very important. Why? Because based on every spatial situation, like in every district, in a certain period of time, you'll be able to see how the situation changed for education, for the healthcare solution, for the transport mobility system, for the social protection. And based on this, you'll be able to understand what kind of program you need to use on behalf of the city to promote other solutions. So the basic idea is that social inclusive solution, the people we are having now need to feel that everything is changing, and feel it not like with nostalgia or something else, but on the basic data, on the basic numbers, on the basic solution, which will be able to be correlated with them directly. And afterwards, we started to focus on that kind of digital inclusion solution, especially with the development of social infrastructure, schools, healthcare objects like hospitals, like other solutions provided, especially for the people with disabilities, for the clustering population grid and clustering economical development of the city. And it was built on the unified data warehouse. That is the reason why we have the kind of IT architecture of the city, and all the solutions inside the city need to be integrated to each other. So it's not just a standalone solution, but it's something which need to be communicated with each other. Another solution is development of digital twin of Almaty city. We actually did a lot in this. And the basic understanding is that not just getting the digital copy of the city, I mean, from infrastructure point of view, but we need to understand what kind of behavioral analysis we have here in the city. So we see that in Almaty city, about 2 million population of the city, every day they're moving inside the city. Let's say 92% of the city citizens moving every day inside the city. And for some of them, like there is big amplitude for it. because from the city border, going to the center of the city, going to another city border, and it's getting at a certain time. So the basic understanding is like develop through the development of that kind of tracking solution with, of course, focus of that kind of cybersecurity, provide a very good solution, which we will be able to use through the triangulation analysis of the mobile users. So everybody who is coming to the city is tracked, depersonified, right, in the city. So based on this, we can see the data correlation between non-cash transactions listed and tracked with a certain level of the business side. So if you bought a coffee, we'll be able to see how many people bought coffee in this district for a certain period of time. As I said, depersonalized. And a part of this, we are starting to develop and track the kind of small and middle enterprises in order to understand what kind of programs we need to use in certain different districts in the city, especially for the social development, because we had a very good analysis related to the schools, especially for the school for the children, Robotechnic school, because there is a rich district in the city. We call it Medel district and Almaty district, and there is donated district like Alatoo district. And we see that people in the center of the cities are investing more money in education, but people in the border of the cities are not investing money in education. And yeah, that is a very bad correlation. Why? Because these people are still living here, and afterwards, these children without education will be a problem for the government. So we can provide more subsidized money to develop new solutions for the education system. And as I said, based on that kind of data-driven decisions, we are trying to develop the kind of digital economy, where the city will be like a supportive power, not like a pulling power, but something supportive. And it means that we will subsidize some kind of money, but we're not paying for everything. And as I said, it's really important to provide the kind of environmentally friendly city with the whole solution of the services. And yep, I have 2 minutes more. And for the 2 minutes, I want to make a certain conclusion about the development of the digital government. Because digital government, in our understanding, it's not just something which we can say like for the whole country. All of us are very unique. I mean, like the citizens are unique. The cities are unique as well. So when we're talking about digital government, we need to understand what kind of education we need to provide for our children, right? If you have the kind of data source, you see that this child has some kind of talent for, I don't know, mathematics, another for physics, another for chemistry. The fourth one is really good drawer. It means that they need a certain approach to develop themselves, right? If you use the same standard of the development, the same standard of the program from the city government, from the country government, it means that like, okay, you will use a technical background development, and the guy who is really not really good in the technical part, he will not be, or she will not be able to be adaptable to the society afterwards. And the same solution we see from the digital government on the city level. Currently, we see that the country level solutions provides the whole program. We call Digital Kazakhstan, we call Digital Yell, no matter what kind of name it is. We see that it's standard for everybody, for Arkala, for Kostanay, for Karaganda, for Aktau, for Almaty city. But it's specific. Why? Because the city is different. You see, Almaty city is 2 million population, the level and maturity of income of the citizens is totally different from the people who are living in Arkala or in Kostanay. Actually, like the whole understanding of the development perspective of the world for the certain citizens, for the certain city, is totally different. Why? Because the problems they have are really different. And it means that digital government, in the very good perspective, need to provide a very good customized solution for every city. So the city, according to their talent, according to their background, according to their experience, will be able to show up all they have from the best perspective. So that is the point with the digital government. And what is really important is that we have data. Thanks to data, we'll be able to understand which city is, I don't know, mathematically oriented, which city is like physics oriented, which city is like a very good singer? Something like this. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Konirbayev. This was a very interesting idea of the future that can be utopic, but has also a bit of potential to be quite dystopic.
Actually, like last year for Almaty Data Lake, for Unified Data Warehouse, we got the best project of the year nominated by IEEE. It's like Engineering Society, Electrotechnical Engineering Society, IEEE. It's like one of the best ones in the world. And in June 2022, Department of Digitalization exists in the city only for 3 years. And in June 2022, last year, we've been listed by Bloomberg as top 4 Asian cities with that kind of vision of the development of the digital strategy. So we're trying to do something very specific here.
It's very impressive, both in terms of vision and in terms of data as a public resource, not only a private resource. I think that's important. At the same time, as someone who, as long as I don't have my glasses and a SIM card, I'm quite lost. I think that the digital divide is a real thing. Yeah. It's not only the old people who eventually will die and we don't have to worry about them. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. I know that you can't stay here, but we'll pass on question if anyone has questions for you, and good luck with the project. We look forward to hearing updates in the coming years.
Yeah, I hope we'll be able to see each other.
Thank you. I suggest that we just go through the presentation so we have a Q&A at the end. And so we now move on to Mr. Farrukh Khakimov, who's the head of department at the Development Strategy Center in Tashkent. And he's going to talk to us about digital government transformation dynamics in Central Asian states. So again, moving from a local dimension to a Central Asian one.
Thank you. Thank you. Opportunity for young researchers, for practitioners and scholars. It's a good opportunity, as we are witnessing that to study the regional dynamics, we have to meet frequently and exchange ideas, because some of initiatives have already finished, some are news are implementing. So if we collaborate in studying the current dynamics, it would be also beneficial for the region, for the countries. So during my presentation, I will talk about the general dynamics in, sorry.
The usual bit of suspense. Will the tech work?
It's not moving to the next slide, but
here it is.
Yes. So during my presentation, we will talk about the digital capacity of Central Asian states at the current moment. And then we will also overview the e-government initiatives of 5 Central Asian states. And then we will also overview the national digitalization strategies and national programs of Central Asian states, and then based on our observation, I will present my conclusions and short recommendations. Basically, most of countries, be it advanced or developing or even less developed countries, especially after the COVID-19 global pandemic, realized that our future is directly related with the development of internet and information technologies. That's why many countries prioritize it to developing their national IT infrastructure, firstly by improving their legislation, and then also implementing and investing to improve their IT ecosystem. If we look at the current situation regarding the internet penetration, as internet is a main tool of the current communication and serves as a platform to other innovations. So we can see that on the table, like the percentage of people in Central Asia who have access to the internet, we can see that the very huge digital divide between countries. And if we go deeper, we can see even the digital divide within the states and regions. So in general, the positive dynamic is observed in Kazakhstan. According to official and open sources, more than 90% of people have access to the internet, be it broadband internet or mobile internet. And in the region also, Kyrgyzstan, around 80%, they have access to the internet. But the situation in Tajikistan and Turkmenistan is less than the global average. Uzbekistan is also doing very well to build information society and to increase its internet capacity and infrastructure. That's why, due to the recent initiatives and reforms, country also catching up Kazakhstan as a leading country in the region. Regarding the price and affordability of the internet, we should also mention that situation is not also very good in Central Asia. Besides Kazakhstan, most of 4 countries are below the world average, and regarding the internet speed and its cost for using. And affordability also the problem. However, if you look at the general situation, and if we move to the next slide regarding the e-government initiatives in Central Asia, we can see that countries are improving step by step, and the general condition is also improving. So tries to catch up each other, and the countries also tries to catch up the advanced countries by prioritizing their own national programs. E-government, if you look to e-government, which is a very good tool to analyze the current readiness of Central Asian states, and also to study other dynamics of digitalization in Central Asia. That's why most of our colleagues have been using and addressing it. I will not go deep to this platform and e-government survey of the United Nations. But there is also another criteria to define the digitalization progress of Central Asian states. Is World Bank's GovTech Maturity Index, where countries of Central Asia has also improved their position. For example, Kazakhstan has been already like a leading country with a A category, which means Kazakhstan has advanced and innovative solutions for public administration. And also in the previous GTMI index, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan had B category, but Uzbekistan had improved its position, and now it's already in the position of Kazakhstan. But again, Tajikistan and mostly Turkmenistan is has a very minimal focus on GovTech technologies. It is calculation and collaboration is very different. Scholars can address their method of assessment. We can come back to this later on. Regarding the national digitalization strategies in Central Asia, we have already talked about Digital Kazakhstan initiative, like national state program, which has been successfully implemented, and the country has already moved to the second stage. And as I observed, many items in the first, this Digital Kazakhstan has been successfully implemented. For example, let it be internet penetration, or the coverage of internet, or the speed of internet has even achieved more than the target percentages or target items. Kyrgyzstan has also national digital program, which has been already mentioned by our colleague, Ms. Dr. Muratbekova, during the observation of Euro-Asian Economic Union's digital agenda. And they have also several priorities, like making better for people, making public delivery services from the government to even local remote regions, and also the special attention in the national digitalization strategies or national programs of Central Asian states is given to the improving the digital skills of our population. That's why it's also a good sign of inclusive development. Despite Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, two countries, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, they have national programs, not specific digital strategy, but they mostly focus on digital economy, to improving their economic growth. And then as a part of digital economy, they see that digitalization programs and strategies. Uzbekistan's strategy also has been adopted in 2020 during the very pandemic. And afterwards, there was a national state program for 2 years to implement like a roadmap. Main attention was given to the regions and the infrastructure, improving the infrastructure. And also after the COVID-19 global pandemic, government and the country revised its policy. There was many corrections on and priorities have been changed, but in general, the focus is given to the improving the country's capacity and infrastructure, and also improving the digital skills of population, of our, especially young generation, and also active collaboration with international partners, mainly with Central Asian countries as a model has been really appreciated Kazakhstan's experience. For example, in Uzbekistan's new development strategy for 2026, 5-year strategy, also special attention is given to the digitalization of both economy and public administration. We aim to, by the end of 2026, to get 100% of digital services, public services, and also improve digital economy from current less than 1% to improve its the share of digital economy in country's national GDP up to 2.5%. We should also mention that after the consistent reforms, Uzbekistan has improved its position in global rankings, international rankings. For example, I have already mentioned that in the United Nations e-government survey, Uzbekistan improved its position from 81 to 69. And now after the Kazakhstan is the second country in the region. And also it has improved its position in the GovTech Maturity Index. Moreover, we are after the Uzbekistan's opening up policy, like giving more opportunity, more space for communication. Government agencies are making data available for public and for researchers as well. That's why open data policy now is going very widely and has improved its position in global ranking, even top 10 countries. And there's a lot of different dimensions and different approach to the rankings, but general conclusion is that many countries of Central Asia are focused on digitalization, and they see it is as a part of national growth, economic growth. But there is several challenges which should be addressed individually and collaboratively. I would suggest, of course, a collective solution, because as a region now moving to more closer to each other, a digital sphere can serve as a good platform, as a good mechanism. For example, there I listed several challenges, and based on that, we should also work on, for example, narrowing digital divide between countries and within the countries, within the countries. More giving attention to the regions, not only capitals or big cities, but also to the remote areas, not only in terms of benefiting, but also in terms of giving the opportunity for people access to the information, like as a part of their rights, human rights. And also countries should develop bilateral relations and attract more international partners to diversify and not relying on one provider. As we talked about, for example, now the major equipments, major investments coming from Chinese state-owned companies or private companies, anyway, is a good solution for now. But we also should attract another advanced nations, and by giving them a good opportunity, also by being capable to their demands. And also the main core issue now currently is the privacy and data protection. This also should be related not only to the state-centric approach, but also civic or citizen-centric approach, because this is a matter of the human rights and the privacy of the people. So if the people, citizens are relying on their government, their state, and giving, there is a trust, so state and governments should be also very, I would say, responsible to this, and should not only manage it in terms of national security or sovereignty, but also to the respect of their rights and their privacy. In my understanding, the good mechanism of providing the regional digital connectivity would be institutionalization of regional economic cooperation. If, for example, we move again to the next stage at the highest level, thanks to the country's initiatives since 2017, we have good, like, consultative meetings of Central Asian states, heads of Central Asian states. This should be, it's time to move it as an institution, as it has been before, because individually with bilateral agreements, we cannot achieve whole Central Asian connectivity, digital connectivity. But if we, how to say, join in one institution, like let it be upper state institution, but anyway, it will serve for the benefit of the population, benefit of states, and also for the region as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khakimov. It looks like you believe a little bit more than other speakers in the possibility of regional cooperation.
Very optimistic.
You're very optimistic, and it's great to hear that. It's also great to hear about this idea of data as public data, so not only something that belongs to corporations for profit. And collective solutions to some of these problems. Of course, you highlighted the issue of the difference between cities and rural areas, which is one of the many digital divides that any kind of digital futures will have to take into consideration. And I believe that our next speaker will discuss that more in detail. So please welcome Mr. Talant Sultanov, who's the chair and co-founder of the Internet Society-Kyrgyz chapter, and he's going to talk about closing the digital divide in Central Asia.
Thanks so much, Elisa. I am going to pick up from the point that my colleague Farrukh mentioned, narrowing the digital divide, on the example of Kyrgyzstan. But I first will have to learn how to press the clicker. Okay. Oops. So since this is the last session, I wanted to entertain you a little bit first. So there are 3 quiz questions. Who is the best-selling poet in the US? Do you know?
Is it Kipling?
Who?
Kipling?
Kipling? No. It will be related to Central Asia, because we are in Central Asia. So while you think he wasn't a poet. Okay, second question is, what is Bob Dylan's connection to Central Asia? The first question, you know.
Can we do what any self-respecting student would do and ask ChatGPT?
I think that's really interesting, because okay, so somebody's doing ChatGPT, no? I'll go to responses. The best-selling poet in the US turns out to be Rumi. Did you know? From Central Asia. I was really impressed. The connection of Bob Dylan to Central Asia, in his autobiography, he writes that his ancestors came from a province in Turkey, and his grandmother's last name was Kyrgyz. So in Turkey, there is a little Kyrgyz community that's been living there for some period of time. So we hope to think that maybe he has some Central Asian blood. And the third is Santa Claus, the Norwegian scientist, not Kyrgyz scientist, said that Santa Claus should be living in Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia to be able to cover all of the planet during the Christmas time. So now on to the more serious things. So why we should care about Central Asia in addition to Rumi and Santa Claus. Challenges. This is a map that NASA produces. The difference of temperatures between 1950s and today, and it seems that during the winter, Central Asia has experienced the biggest warm up of the climate over this period. Another challenge is we have the North Pole, the South Pole, and also scientists say that the Central Asia area is the third pole with all these glaciers. They provide water to the whole, we can see Eurasian continent, and a lot of climate change happening there. And the third, Central Asia region, and I think this is a very informative slide, is landlocked. And one of the experts from Russia said that it's also sanctioned locked. Why it's important for internet connectivity? Landlocked, and we're actually very far away from the sea, so we have long distance to access the internet cables. Some of our countries are actually double landlocked. Only one country in the world, except for Liechtenstein, which I think it's a very small country, almost like a paradise, but Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country. Yesterday, our colleagues, Professor Sailov and Professor Sabirov, mentioned that Kazakhstan has vast distances and sparse population. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are mountainous. The climate in Central Asia is very difficult, that we have harsh winters. So all of this makes building internet cables very difficult, costly, and time-consuming. And on top of that, we are also sanctioned locked. We know what's happening in Afghanistan, sanctions on Iran, now sanctions to our neighbors in the north. So all of that makes internet connectivity difficult for our region. And in addition to that, you would think that since it's such a difficult area, we should be able to kind of find ways to make laying internet cables cheaper. But no, in Kyrgyzstan, we, the humans, decided to make it even more difficult. So when it comes to infrastructure sharing, instead of all of us using one tower, every mobile operator has to build its own tower to provide internet. And moreover, these towers are connected to electricity across the road, and they have to build separate power lines and separate power towers. And this is a strategic north-south highway. Just try building something over this highway. It will take years to get permissions. And something that's invisible to this eye, in this highway, there's also internet cables. And they were built by 3 companies at different times. Every company had to dig its own trench. So it took probably a lot of money. And that ends up being that connectivity in Central Asia or in Kyrgyzstan becomes very difficult. But also there are opportunities. Central Asia can be seen as digital bridge connecting all the major kind of regions of the world. McKinsey Global Institute calculated what was the center of economic activity in the world historically. It started in Central Asia, made a loop all the way to Europe, and they believe the center of economic activity is coming back to Central Asia. And third, Dr. Fred Starr wrote this book, The Lost Enlightenment. If you haven't read it, it's a really great book. Actually, if you read it, you think everything originated in Central Asia, science, culture, but I think most of it is truth. And but it's an inspirational book saying that if Central Asia in the past managed to be a center of science, maybe we can regain that potential now. So how are we trying to close the digital divide? First of all, of course, we need to identify the problem. There is an initiative by GIGA run by ITU and UNICEF which mapped all the schools around the world and measured how connected they are. And here, in the case of Kyrgyzstan, you could see some schools are maybe green, some are yellow, and there are some schools which are invisible, black, because there is no internet there. And they did this measurement before the COVID. So we decided that to help these schools that were shut down, and regardless if your village has internet or not, the school had to be shut down. So if you have no internet, students, of course, cannot study. So we try to deliver to all these locations internet in a box. We downloaded all the knowledge into this small device with a small computer. You only have to plug it into electricity and you will get access to this knowledge. And there were some villages which had no electricity, so we provided little solar panels which could charge these boxes. And this initiative was listed as one of 7 global educational initiatives by Reuters Foundation during the COVID. But we thought that we should not stop there. We should not just stop by internet in a box, but actually connect these remote villages to the internet. And here we have a village called Zhyldyz, which it doesn't have internet, but it also has no TV, no radio. It even has no roads and no electricity. So connecting these kinds of villages can be very difficult. And as Mr. Zhyldyz and Mr. Sabirov mentioned, that these villages have no commercial, let's say, payback return to commercial providers. And in case of Kyrgyzstan, government may not have budget to connect these villages. So we turned to the local community. So with the help of local community, we delivered this equipment and we set up this, what we call community internet networks, internet that is run by the community. And these are the cases how it was done. Because there was no electricity, we had to be very divisive. Sometimes, horses and donkeys would carry the equipment. Sometimes little cars would not fit our solar panels. So it was really a big adventure. On top of that, even if you have internet, people may not have actual devices. Actually, households with computers is very limited in Kyrgyzstan. Smartphones are better, but still there are households that have no smartphones. And in this case, we called for the community to donate smartphones. In this case, a member of the National Academy of Sciences, a lady, she donated her smartphone. So we took it to a little girl in the village, and we are hoping, we have a belief in Central Asia that your positive energy can be transferred with the thing. So we thought maybe this lady, academician's positive energy will help this little girl in Zhyldyz village, and she will grow up to be an academician too. And in addition to that, what we found out, these Limbox devices, we had 2 terabyte hard disks in it, and we downloaded all the content in Kyrgyz language, educational content. How much space do you think we filled in these hard disks? 10%. Almost 30%. So 70% of this hard disk was empty because there is no relevant content, relevant educational content in a local language. So we decided to create this Limbox educational portal in Kyrgyz language, where you can find all the classes broken by grades, by subjects, and you can study even online. And what we found out, it wasn't just the kids in rural communities benefiting from this platform, it was the teachers in rural communities that were benefiting from this. And moreover, kids of labor migrants, of Kyrgyz labor migrants living outside, they were using this portal to keep the Kyrgyz language. And on top of that, we've created a YouTube channel where we put all the science, biology, all kinds of science experiments in Kyrgyz language on a YouTube channel where you can watch it all for free. And this was a Creative Commons videos. We thought we would do ourselves, but it was very difficult. So we used somebody else's content, which was free, and used Kyrgyz language on top of it. So we have infrastructure, we have the content, but do we have the skills in rural areas to benefit from all these internet technologies? And we launched this project called Sanari Pinsan, Digital Citizen, funded by the European Union, where we are teaching youth and women and girls in rural communities for digital skills. And we had speakers yesterday discussing e-commerce and digital tourism, like Maya and Lira. These are exactly the subjects that we are teaching communities in rural areas: how to attract tourists to your village, how to sell your products and services online. And this was really, for us, a gratifying experience. And in addition to just trainings, we've adapted the global knowledge into Kyrgyz language. So, for example, there is a GSMA association that produced a toolkit, mobile internet skills toolkit, and we've translated it into Kyrgyz and Russian, because now the Russian is not becoming so popular. You cannot, I guess in Russia, they cannot translate all these materials, but we wanted these materials to be useful for whole of Central Asia. And we did it toolkit like this. And this is a print version of it. Privacy and personal data protection becomes very important, since more people join online. They are very trustful of the content of the internet and can be subject to potential bad guys. And I think one more project that we are doing in rural areas is using smart devices to measure climate conditions, and hoping that maybe we could also use it to monitor biodiversity. And so this is my concluding slide, and I'd like to summarize the principles that we are using to do our work in Kyrgyzstan. The number one principle that we are using, that whichever project we start, we think girls first, because there are certain kind of aspects that we don't realize living in the cities, living in comfortable areas, that for girls in rural areas to participate in digital economy, sometimes you have to consider the hours. When we went to training in rural areas, at 4 o'clock, all the girls had to leave, all the women, because they said, well, we have chores in the house, nobody is going to take care of the animals, we have to feed our families. So that was one thing that occurred to us. Second kind of principle is rural first. In Bishkek, there are so many things happening, conferences, hackathons, everything in Russian language, in English language. We are going into provinces. There are zero activities there, and we're trying to kind of deliver content there. Mobile first, since people have no computers, everything has to be mobile, adapted to mobile telephone, smartphone. Local language first, that we are starting everything with Kyrgyz language. All the events we are doing is in Kyrgyz language. All the materials we are producing is in Kyrgyz language, because on the internet, most of the content is in Russian or in English. But in Kyrgyzstan, 80% of the population in rural areas, Kyrgyz language is the first and often the only language people speak. And finally, green first, that digital technologies should help rural communities preserve the nature and the climate in there. I think this is it. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, very practical. And I was struck by the fact that you drew our attention to language, which is something we haven't discussed very much so far, but of course it's a form of almost infrastructural dominance. So countries that have the biggest number of speakers of a language, and the wealthier countries, then they're better represented, and a lot of people are left without any content, or with very little content that they can engage with. So that is definitely a very important part, even if we think of regional cooperation, it's still need to pay attention to the individual components. So thank you. That was an excellent complement to the other perspectives we've had so far. And we're moving on now to Professor Tegizbekova. Okay, more or less. Who's a professor at Alatoo International University, and she's going to talk about data governance and personal data protection in the Kyrgyz Republic.
Okay, thank you. After so brightful presentation, my presentation looks so simple, but anyway. So I'm actually from Kyrgyzstan, but I also working in Kazakhstan. I'm in Tashkent in Uzbekistan also. I actually consider myself like more like personal data lawyer rather than just IT lawyer. So I'm also doing consulting how to protect personal data in private companies. But for the last 2 years, I know that I'm working closely with personal data agency of the Kyrgyz Republic. So that's why I decided just to talk about how the personal data could be protected, is protected, and could be protected in the future. So the Kyrgyzstani situation is really interesting when we talk about personal data. We are not so fast like Kazakhstani legislation yet. We adopted our law just many years ago in 2008, but it's interesting that our constitution, and it's some unique provision, legal provision in our country, that our constitution requested that and just provided that state has to provide protection of personal data for everyone. It's interesting provision because if you compare some other constitutional Central Asian countries, there is nothing like that. I don't know who that smart expert who decided to lobby this provision in our new version of our constitution, but it's really great. So that's why if you talk about the personal data protection, first of all, it's obligation of our country. So sometimes when we talk about personal data, we have to talk about the human rights, that personal data protection, it's a part of privacy, it's a part of confidentiality of humans. But in our country, we can open the constitution, say, hi, government, you have to protect my personal data because constitution talking about it. Oops. Okay. So I just, even when you talk about what is the meaning of data governance, right? Today, globally, regionally, nationally, everybody talking about digitalization. But when we talk about e-commerce, of course, it's also about the personal data protection also. And the main obligation and task of the government to establish this consistent set of standards which should be followed by the private companies also. So when we talk about the standards, it's about data quality, data availability, usability, integrity, and of course, security. So why it's important, of course, because data governance areas, it's about health. I'm not sure that somebody will be lucky if his or her medical personal data will be in public. No, of course, no. Especially, for example, if the person have yes, for example, can you imagine if all those data will be in public? I mean, it's of course it's the obligation of the country to provide this strong security of the data, internet, job, and of course specific categories of personal data. So when we talk about personal data, as I mentioned previously, our law of Kyrgyz Republic was established many years ago, in 2008. Actually, for that time, I have been working in aviation field. I was aviation lawyer. I have been working of data of passengers, but I didn't know that it's called personal data. So, and in 2008, actually, nobody knew what is the meaning of personal data, but our legislation knew about it. It's a very interesting moment. And actually, our law is not maybe just reflecting the modern trends, how to protect personal data, but we are planning to draft to make amendments in our legislation. But at the same time, yes, maybe it's not about regulation, it's more about people and government and officials who are working in this field. So we're still using the definition, very old definition from our from this personal data law, but of course we are planning to change it. And of course it's not easy. So when we talk about the type of personal data, just very theoretical frameworks, it's about general, personal data, biometric, special. So all those types anyway have to be protected by the governments, and not only by the government, but also by other private companies. So, for example, when I'm talking about special types, you see race, nationality. It's a very sensitive personal data, and for us, actually, it depends on the country, what kind of special categories of personal data have to be double protected. For example, in Kyrgyzstan in 2010, it was a just ethnic conflict between Kyrgyz and Uzbek people. So after that, we decided to delete and erase this, one of the elements from our ID passport, the nationality. So because it could negatively reflect for people, and after 2010, we don't have the nationality, for example, in our ID, because nationality becomes a part of the specific personal data according to our legislation. So, and if you talk about, again, back to our legislation, of course, citizen is only legal owner of personal data. But anyway, there are different type of holders who can temporarily have the right also to have this access to our personal data. And for example, some examples, what kind of personal data, how the personal data could be collected. So you see from electronic wallets, from the schools, especially from the schools. I mean, schools should be really protected, not only by government, by cybersecurity departments of each school, because there are so many data, not only of children, but of the parents, of the teachers, etc., etc. So all those actually, this database from school, from state, marketing, internet banking, discount card. So all those just database have to be protected. And of course, how, that's another first question. And I think it's not only a problem in Kyrgyzstan, it's a problem in many countries about when we talk about the leakage of personal data. So who should be responsible for that? What kind of compensation the person could get if his or her personal data become public? Of course, it's a very huge question. So according to data in Kyrgyzstan, for nowadays, here we could see who are holders of personal data files in Kyrgyzstan. So for nowadays, there are several types of databases. Just state database which belong to state, database which belong to commercial companies. Maybe there are some specific database like very specific, maybe of social network database, etc. And why it's important to protect again personal data? Because what kind of information, for example, governments could know about us? You see, so many data are open for government, and of course, it's important to know for person how his or her personal data are protected and who can have access to his or her personal data. So if we talk about commercial organization, yes, if we talk about state, it's clear, state knows everything about that. So if you talk about commercial organization, so again, we could see that social security number could be open, could be known by for commercial organization, passport data, of course, address, etc., etc. And actually, those personal data also have to be protected. But it's a question in our country that nowadays, how our personal data are collected by companies, and who have to monitor and control those companies, it's a huge question. And we will talk about it just a little bit later. For example, when we talk about personal data protections, there is an example, what the commercial organization could know about citizens, just Yandex, right? Here you could see it's not only about the schedule of the passenger, but also about some different types of information could be known for administration of Yandex taxi administration. And of course, how Yandex could protect our data. And there were already some cases of leakage of personal data from Yandex Taxi, from Yandex Food, and etc., from other companies also. And who had to protect, and which state agency has to protect our data? So the first of all, it's a state agency, as I mentioned previously. It's a very new one. It was just, yes, thank you. It was just established maybe 1.5 years ago. And a lot of a lot of already job was done by the state agency. Here you could see the data, for example, how many incident was investigated by agency, how many local acts were drafted by agency. Here you could see there are, and the interesting moment, there are only 10 people who are working in this agency. It's a very small agency, but they're trying to do the best to just to protect this system, but unfortunately it's not enough. It's not enough. It's an obligation not only of agency but also by all of us. And here you could see the violation which should be protected by the government. It should be the standards should be drafted, and of course private companies also have to just provided preventive measures to stop all these possible human rights violations. So why it's important? There are already cases when personal data were breached, were already violated by some companies. And what I wanted to say that there are so many, some other different type of regulation, but unfortunately it's still not enough. So from our side, I could say that this legal draft were drafted by me and my IT team. But you know, it's not easy to implement. The problem not to draft legislation, the problem is how to implement this all those legislation and regulation. So that's all. Sorry.
And the fact that I forget to open the microphone. So sorry, between ideas, ideals, and implementation, that's the gap where a lot of us are working. We'll jump to the last presentation that will close this panel from Professor Adibayeva, who's a dean here at KIMEP. And thank you again for hosting us and hosting the conference.
Thank you for coming and using this opportunity. Thank you so much.
We opened a panel by talking about digital Almaty, and now we're going to hear a bit more about e-government in Kazakhstan as a state. So what are the opportunities and challenges?
Is it now on? All right. Okay. So I have to say in advance that I'm joining the utopian camp over here. Okay. And in a way, part of me is very happy that we had the presentation of the first speaker, Bayan Konirbayev, and I'm very happy to hear some of the specifications done by Talant, because in general, I am with them. Okay. And even though the topic was claimed as to be quite general, I'm going to be talking about very specific group of users, okay? Mostly people that are called disadvantaged group. And in this regard, I will skip some of the general information because, you know, I don't want to repeat something that had been said before. However, let's say points number 1 and 2 specify how many services we have in terms of the online e-governance, and again, the topic is e-governance. The second one, of course, is the latest changes in the program, and we've heard today that there is the latest change in terms of the title of the program and launching of the new program, the National Development Plan, for example, starting from 2022. But if you look at the interaction scheme, if it's possible to say, which is number 3, it's usually government citizens, government business through the platform, branches of government between themselves, and finally government employees. Okay, so if we are speaking about the disadvantaged groups of population, then we probably speak about the first one and the fourth one. It is government citizen. Okay, and as a bonus point or a kind of a future perspective for this disadvantaged group, it's probably to be employed, and maybe employed with the help of the digital jobs. Okay, so I'm going to again skip a lot of explanations because we have heard from previous presentations there are different rankings in terms of the Kazakhstani effectiveness of the e-government and governance as well, because you can see this term more and more appearing because it basically is a broader term. And the 28th place of Kazakhstan in the global index, you can see that in Kazakhstan, in Central Asia and South Caucasus, it takes the first place. There are some additional indexes, which I like most. Of course, it's open data index because it correlates with the open government from one hand, but also it correlates with the general concept of Kazakhstani state as the social hearing state, okay, listening and social hearing state, where all of the categories of let's say, citizens have to be involved and interacting at, different levels. And of course, e-participation index that ranked Kazakhstan in 2020 as number 26. If you look at most of the publications from the top, okay, you turn on Google, you try to see the publications and you try to find out some tasks that are still ahead, because ranked to be very high also obliges most of the program providers, platform providers to be better, okay? So out from the scratch, you can see some tasks, and I put selected because there are big tasks, such as, for example, cybersecurity, okay? And there are more specific tasks, right, like legal framework of the e-government platform, inclusiveness of various groups into the, let's say, participation. Very specific task, investing into the, let's say, providing of the fiber optics into the regions that are probably lacking that, all right, which raises another issue, of course, a separate one. I found also quite interesting for me and for group of the researchers that I'm dealing with, digital literacy, because offering the platform, which is going to be top advanced, is one thing. It's a priority of the government, of the program, and so on. Starting using this platform is another question. Okay, there are lots of triggering factors for especially disadvantaged groups that stop and serve as the barrier for starting using that and probably improving their social conditions, probably be more, let's say, included into the society. So I put over here disadvantaged groups as aged or disabled, but of course, disabled people are of a priority. However, if you see the academic articles in academic publications, you will see that sometimes these two may meet, okay, because among the aged, we can meet disabled as well. So in terms of the statistics, it's really, really difficult to make a split because sometimes age might coincide with the, let's say, some ranks or some levels of disabilities. And of course, digital divide, which I'm very happy that has been announced by the previous speakers, because the digital divide is also a multi-phase and multi-level problem, okay? One way is not to have, for example, digital devices, okay? And for some social groups, it might be the case. Another level of the digital divide might be the different versions adoptable for let's say, certain apps, which certain groups, like disabled people or aged people, might not have, okay? Simply not have a good mobile smartphone and so on, adoptable for all of those apps. And of course, telecommunication infrastructure improvement, which is another task. Now, this is just, again, out of the scratch, you can see some things that we have heard already today, but I would be interested, since digital literacy might be one of the barriers, okay, for disadvantaged groups. What can we see in these numbers? The first one is, in general, the digital literacy, which were broken by age 6 up to 74. And you can see that by 2022, Kazakhstan had reached, by some resources, 87.3. There are some other resources that provide 85%. Might be, okay, it's just a matter of different resources. In general, the number is very high, all right? This is age range that you can see. I also found the statistics in terms of the regional breakdown, okay, again about the digital literacy. And you also can see that Almaty city provides with a high number, okay, Astana, which takes the leading position in this case, and lower positions taken by different regions. So geographical factor also might, impact in general, but also specific groups that I've already mentioned, which of course would require more data on specific segmentation, and especially specific segmentation of the disadvantaged groups, for example, disabled people, okay? this what has been done in terms of the more involvement, or at least discussion about the more involvement of these disabled groups of people in one of the forums that took place in 2022 in Indonesia. And the forum published the report, the inclusion of persons with disabilities into the digital economy and green economy. Okay, a huge portion of this forum has been devoted to the green economy, but one of the parts of this report exactly aimed and targeted people with disabilities all over the world. And there were some statistics, of course, global statistics by areas, regions, states, and so on. And according to the GSM Association, for example, there is a significant gap in terms of the ownership even of the mobiles, okay, amongst the people with the disabilities. The second point was given a special priority because the forum is not just to discuss, but also to probably elaborate some programs, how we can involve more, let's say, digital skills that are leading to digital jobs for these specific groups, okay? And it was interesting that when people started to discuss the artificial intelligence as a barrier or enabler among this specified group, there were 4 categories at least named in terms of what kind of devices have to be developed so that people will start communicating and be a participant and a user of all those governance, e-governance platforms more, okay, especially with specific groups. And in terms of the Kazakhstani projects, one of the examples, again, selected example, for example, was the Surdo Online. Okay, I put it on the slide. It's a cloud platform with Surdo Online projects and Surdo Online app into the mobile. My friends, where certain category of disabled people can be more involved with the help of the Surdo translation specialists and so on. If we move to some of the examples, what can be done, okay, in terms of the increase of the literacy, digital literacy among the specified groups, you can see some selective list of what has been done in Canada, for example, in 2019. I really liked the example of Kenya, but it took place in Kenya. Of course, the organizers were basically international organizations, NGOs, and so on. So IT Bridge Academy decided to involve and start, first of all, launch the IT training and digital literacy program, education program for people with disabilities. And it was even a contest. I mean, 500 people applied and only 4 were selected to take part. But as a result, a kind of assessment from another side, you can see that 37 out of this 40 first took the global certification exam very successfully. And by the end, even before completion of the program, they have been employed, okay, which is an ultimate aim. The research may start with the very minor things, spotting, segmenting, and so on, but the ultimate aim, of course, was to involve these groups of people more into the digital jobs or employment in general. This, by the way, is what South Korea had implemented during this forum, suggesting that, okay, in general, we can say that there are several, classifications of the digital skills, basic, mid-level, advanced, digital, soft skills. And they pointed out that actually, if the appropriate training program, learning program may start, the disadvantaged groups of population may actually learn all of them, okay, gradually or immediately, depending on their previous background and so on. What else can be done? Of course, address more needs to the disadvantaged people, digital labor platforms, because I have to say that the platform, let's say e-government, for example, is providing a huge information for disabled people, okay, plus a huge amount of possibilities. But we also can speak about, again, digital literacy as a sort of a barrier to start doing this and to start using this program. And possible recommendation might be to train social monitors that are going to assist face-to-face, because we cannot exclude the physical presence of somebody that may train these segmented groups of the society at some point, at least make them to start. Provide information on changing skills, digital skills as well, in terms of the employment opportunities. Now, what we can do as the social science school, okay, we are the university. Yes, I remember. Yeah. You don't have to do this. My airport is waiting, I know. So in terms of the educational, let's say, institution, We can use the research opportunities, we can use the opportunities for social projects. Okay, it doesn't mean that these social projects might be done separately from NGOs, for example. It can be a good start of the networking with, let's say, different NGOs that are socially oriented, or Almaty office that can provide, or we can provide some statistics, more segmentations for better, let's say, implementation of the new programs, new platforms, new, let's say, apps that would help these segmented groups of people. And public administration students, I'm very happy to see some of them might be a good part of the involvement of this. As a research, if there is going to be enough data for the research, and I'm sure it will be, at the moment, it's very embryonic. We're just starting to think about this. So it's a working, paper in future. And there are some intended methodological, let's say, plans like policy reviews, existing analysis of existing data, working with different, let's say, agencies, socially active agencies, collection, maybe creation some of the statistics, could be as a result of the research, maybe. But what I did, firstly, is because I looked at the academic literature that exists in this topic and find out that in general, it can be grouped into the very general, kind of generic academic articles. Okay, for example, the article that has been published in 2022, a local author, 3 authors actually. And you can see that these authors produced by themselves charts, plots, graphs, bars, in terms of how and what is the evolution of e-government usage and platform in Kazakhstan. The second one, group again, are the researchers that are trying to speak about this digital divide among these, for example, disadvantaged groups, disabled groups. And their approach is to look at what are the stages and types of disabilities, okay, and how the production of devices can help actually to be more and more to be included into the e-governance platforms, which I found actually a bit too general. For the specific works that have been done so far in Kazakhstan, there is a book, actually, a brochure that was done by Abdikaimov Ziad in 2019, and I liked the methodological approach actually that he used. Okay, first he uses the specific audience, which is basically a segmented group of disabled people. He uses legal approach. He uses some of the, let's say, advantages and disadvantages for disabled people in Kazakhstan. He tries to understand the market, but also what I like, he uses the web accessibility in terms of the testing forms. Okay, so he elaborated a huge testing list, trying to understand how comfortable for the disabled people of different types, for example, to use different platforms. So it's not the question what platform suggests them. It suggests a huge amount. It's really a tremendous work that has been done by the Kazakhstani side. But how it's comfortable to use as the navigator, as the interface in different apps, that has been done. But I do understand that 2019, we already have a gap of 5 years, right? Almost 5 years, 4 years. So the platforms have been improved significantly, even for specific groups. Okay, and this is what I've heard from the interviews. I did the preliminary interviews with this group. In ideal world, okay, if we may do the research at the end, a kind of navigator in the academic article research might be the report, a paper done by 3 authors, digital exclusion in e-governance in Ireland. And what really is unique about this research is that the group of authors are trying to approach those most or least using e-governance platforms groups of people. And this is one of the examples of their chart. So it's basically copy-pasted from their article. And you can see that this is information providers' view on the most significant barriers to client access to online services in percentage. And you can see that the longest 3 bars over here, the very longest one, is the aged, older people. Okay. The second one is people with literacy difficulties. We may assume by default that digital literacy might be a part of it. All right. And finally, people living outside major urban centers, which basically what Talant was speaking about, there is a cluster of problems, sometimes a lack of the fiber optics or internet and so on, that probably stops them. We may assume that in all those three longest bars, there might be people with disabilities, groups of disabilities in each of these three. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Adibayeva. And we now have about, let's see, 7 German minutes, 10 Italian minutes for a quick Q&A with our panelists, but also with those who presented the previous sessions. Then I suggest we compress a little bit the timeline, and so maybe have a couple of minutes to stretch our legs, but then we can move on to the final keynote speech, because I think that we've talked about ideas, ideals. We talked about all these different things we should pay attention to, we should do. But as Professor Tegizbekova pointed to, the writing or having the ideas is the easy part. The implementation is complicated. And our keynote speech has a very practical experience in implementation of digital projects. So I think it will be a great way to wrap up. But before we do that, any questions for our presenters? I see that by shortening the break time, I haven't won any friends. So I'll just ask a quick question to all of you. The way we talk about digital literacy training, digital inclusion, building, finding very creative ways to build the infrastructure in places that are very hard to reach, keeping in mind the rural-urban gap, making data public, etc. These are ways of framing digitization as something that can be achieved as all-encompassing project. So the state can really become an e-government, an e-state, and eventually, all if we work hard enough, all these challenges can be overcome. I would suggest, though, that those challenges, those digital gaps can never be completely overcome. So there will always be people who cannot be included. I think that all of us at different points will not be included, no matter how hard the state, society tries. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on this? What should governments do? Invest in becoming digital while continuing to offer the very same services as in-person services? What is the balance here, given that there are real constraints in time, budgets, human resources?
Can I start with a small story, small anecdote? Kyrgyz government decided that all schools in Kyrgyzstan have to now report. Schools in Kyrgyzstan, they have to submit all kinds of reports regularly to the Ministry of Education. And at some point, the Ministry of Education decided that now you need to submit everything online. We're going to make your life easier. And when we went to a village which has no internet, the teacher, the director was crying. Now she says, my job was already difficult submitting these reports. Now, because I have to do it online, because in the past I could file the paper and send it to somebody and he or she would send it by mail. Now I have to go to a village or city nearby which has internet, find a place to stay, because it takes me 1 day to get there. And then I have to file the documents online. So why I bring up the story is that digitalization can make lives easier, but sometimes it can make life more difficult, especially for people who are yet to be kind of joining the digital economy. So we should not forget, and like the disadvantaged groups, that maybe they don't have the ability to take advantage of all the digital tools for different reasons. So government, when it provides e-services, should leave some opportunities of doing things in old-fashioned analog ways.
Yes, I would just add that the disadvantaged groups will always require some bridge social, physical institution to connect these two. So it doesn't mean that we have to, discourage the digitalization. It's our reality, it's our future. But there are some groups that will require face-to-face, old-fashioned, with the specialists that are trained well, to work with a particular age group, to work with a particular, let's say, disabled groups. But these physical people needs to be there and probably trained, and probably our university can one day think about these social trainers to be the graduates of public administration department, for example. So it's really, including education, including the final job, and even if the final destination is to join those disabled people into the digital jobs, somebody needs to be at least at a certain point with them physically.
So one of my colleagues sometimes say it's not a digitalization, it's a civilization. So it's a very common, I don't know how to translate it in English, but it's just civilization means something is going on. But what is going on, nobody knows. Why I'm saying like that, when we're talking about the digital development, it should cover all areas. For example, nowadays, I think everybody focus on e-paper, e-contracts, smart contracts, what about, but come on, what about, for example, how to protect children in internet space? It's also very important. For example, in Kazakhstan, Ministry of Education already just published and already implementing this policy of against cyberbullying, but we are still thinking about it in Kyrgyzstan. Come on, we have to already to do something in cyberbullying, in cyber grooming, cyber crimes. I mean, increasing every day. For example, only in Kazakhstan, the last year, according to the data, 17,500 crimes will happen in Kazakhstan. There is no data like that in Kyrgyzstan because we just still thinking how to start our supervision and digitalization, and that's a problem that nowadays it's a chaos. We need one coordinator center which will cover all areas. Unfortunately, it's very complicated. Nowadays in Kyrgyzstan, we start to think about to draft digital code. But what does it mean? It's the same constitution of the country. The same ideas are just flying in Kazakhstan and Russia, etc. But what is the meaning of digital code? It's the same constitution, I think. So what I wanted to say, digitalization should be in everywhere, from the kindergarten until the administration of the president.
I would like to draw your attention to one challenging moment of the improving digital skills of population, especially starting from the school, because of the digitalization is very strictly related to the whole nation's development, its economy. So we should also give special attention to other issues. For example, if we improve digital skills only, but if we don't improve the sectors of economy, or if we don't give the decent job opportunities for IT specialists, we will lose again them because of the high demand countries. They may just go abroad, like it would be like brain drain issue for the countries. That's why, I mean, by improving the digital skills of the population, by opening new universities, IT schools or IT universities, we should also improve our industry and economy in general as well, to give the opportunity for them, and also improve the infrastructure of IT and also the whole country, so that to keep them in the country and to use them for the whole national growth.
That's a very good point. It's the digital divide. It's among people, but also among states. So that's also important to keep in mind. Okay, so thank you again to our afternoon open session panelists. Should we have just a couple of minutes to stretch our legs and then come back for the final keynote speech? Yes, thank you. Okay, so I think we're getting ready for our final session. Hello to the people on Zoom too. So we had this very full 2 days of hearing about the digital present, a part of the digital past, and ideas about the digital futures in Central Asia as a region, in Central Asia as a player in the interesting geopolitical times we live in, but also in individual states, their own challenges and opportunities, their divides within the states, etc. So at times we went over the more theoretical side. So we talked about these big ideas about data, the digital, and so forth. But then there is a lot of implementation work that has to be done to make these digital futures possible and as human and humane as we can make them. And I'm really delighted to have as our keynote speaker for our symposium, Mr. Yahiya Tuleshov, who is a member of the management board of the E-Finance Center JSC and the deputy chief executive officer based in Astana, with a long experience in informatization projects. We heard yesterday that you were part of the informatization of customs here in Kazakhstan. And you have a long experience in the financial field, so delivering IT solutions for international companies globally. And so we're really honored to hear your thoughts about digitalization in Central Asia, current and future challenges, both in Kazakhstan and in Central Asia.
Yeah, I have to repeat, I'm really grateful and thank you very much for introduction and for having me part of this discussion, inviting me to be part of this discussion. It's a great opportunity to hear so many different opinions in both on a technical field and on the infrastructure, on the governance of the digitalization, and on what is actually happening in various places, in various countries, from academics, because I'm more on the practical side. In fact, here's an interesting history. I work for the company now called the Center for Electronic Finance, which is a subsidiary of Ministry of Finance. So I work for digitalization of everything related to the Ministry of Finance, revenues, customs, budgeting, etc., etc. So that's why I work. I know quite well the customs the digitalization work. But my first job, actually, I got. Oh, that was when I was in 8th grade, I think, or 9th grade. I was hired to a Ministry of Finance and Economics at that time, and that was the Soviet Union's time. And I was hired to do some calculations. They needed they had some statistical data. They needed some programmer to calculate some trends and be able to prognose and forecast on where economy was going. Well, it didn't go well. I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed, not because of me. But the same department grew, became a separate unit within the Ministry of Finance. Then, as a result of the demand for digitalization, it turned into a subsidiary of Ministry of Finance. And now I'm actually the deputy CEO at the same department that grew into a big company. I have 400 people working for us. We are responsible for all of the activities within the Ministry of Finance, and I'm really honored that that evolution. I could just see that why it happened, when it happened, and it happened because of lots of factors. If there was no infrastructure, digital infrastructure to support of that work, if we didn't have internet available at all of the borders that we have, we talked a lot about how Kazakhstan, how big it is. I mean, it's the 9th biggest country in the world, but it's so very, smallest, the population in terms of the density of the population in Kazakhstan. So we need to make sure that if we are digitalization the customs, the border operations, we need to make sure that internet is available. And I have been to some borders. Oh, they are so remote, so remote. I mean, even the having the satellite internet is probably the best option. So we are all dependent on that. We talked about dependency from the certain manufacturers. I'm not going to name them, but we're not going to run away from that dependency. I try to be pragmatic, and I look at it as, and we are interdependent. We are dependent from them. They are dependent from us, because technological advantage that these certain companies has, they really bring some advantages to us. So, for example, again, I will try to avoid the naming the specific companies, but there is a company who actually works with a database, and they have a technology that can help to increase the efficiency how we work with that data. Because the hardware providers, they never thought of that, but they've been working together with that kind of problems, and they came up with a solution. Of course, the business will go to that company, will buy the solution from them. So it's the world is interdependent from each other, and also we dependent from each other. I'm talking about the government, business, the private, the individuals. We all interdependent from each other. Because, we talked about, for example, a vulnerable group of people. The banks, they have to provide them certain digital literacy, the information to them, not only be able to use them as a customers, but also need to provide them a certain digital literacy. I'm sure that in our neighboring countries, it's a big problem as well. So here, for example, the scamming is becoming very popular these days. It's very popular. However, I have a very trick, way of identifying them. You get a call all of a sudden when somebody calls you, oh, I'm from Kaspi Bank, your credit needs to be authorized, and you need to confirm your 3 digits of your bank number. And I asked them, okay, where are you calling from? And they normally told me Karaganda, Astana, Almaty. I said, okay, what state your office is based on? On what state? Normally they tell the typical Kazakh streets like Dostoyev or Kunaev or whatever, and what building, what next, what's next to your building, and they drop the line because they don't realize they actually identifying it. But there is a better way of identifying these kind of scammers. You can see them from the accent. Central Asia not only geographically located close to each other, but also, well, except maybe Tajikistan, we speak, almost similar language, so we can identify each other by our accents, and that's also something that unique to us, and we have to probably use that as an advantage for some next digitalization ideas. So we talked about the infrastructure from the mining perspective. Hugo kindly shared with us some very interesting information. The government is trying to take advantage of that situation as well and use it. At some point, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, I believe, were in top 5 countries with the cheapest electricity. So lots of miners came and started using that opportunity because for them, they needed cheap electricity and relatively stable internet. Because China didn't want to work with them, so there are lots of miners. They're actually very, the nomads of the modern world. They live in a container. So all of the equipment is in a container. They load it to the truck, and they can move to wherever they want to. Lots of them came from Georgia, from China. How can you take advantage of that situation? Put a tax on it, and make sure that we get money from that, and invest that money back into the area. We have we were talking yesterday about the deficiency of the electricity in the south. In order to do not transport the electricity, but transfer that money and invest into renewable energy in the south. And we have actually, I think it was announced yesterday, another 1 megawatt. No, I think it's terawatt. The renewable energy, the power plants were, from wind turbines, and the solar panels were being built in another region of the Kazakhstan. So put that money into renewable energy, and it's good for the economy, good for the the climate as well. So you know, some clever ways of using taking advantage of the current situation. We talked about that as well, and that's very interesting to have the same kind of discussion in what they say, same session, not from the business perspective. Businessmen, they talk differently. They start shouting about their problems and demanding, oh, I need more, you know, he's on tax, I need this, I need that. But the academics, you know, I can see that you have a completely different approach, and it's really privileged to be part of that discussion. We talked also about especially Ayuna, I like the way of you putting the path. That we are all agents of this transformation happening, but also the path we choose. Sometimes it's quite important when the government, you know, as a part of my job, when we take decision on what kind of technology we should use to solve certain problems, to come up with a solution. It becomes quite important that what path we choose. I don't know if you remember, there was I think it was Tony Blair's time, the UK government. They at some point, in order to limit the dependency from the petrol engines, the UK government chose to invest into subsidizing. I think it was subsidizing the diesel engines, and they thought the diesel engines are more, you know, ecologically eco-friendly. Let's invest into that. So they subsidized it. They invest a lot. They demanded that the automatic cars would build up more diesel engines, but it turned out it was not the right decision. At that same time, Japanese government, they invested more into electric cars, and they were, you know, they had better data and better analysis, and they made the right decision. While the UK government they were relying on the fake data. Well, maybe not exactly the fake, but the data was not was manipulated, and as a result, well, maybe they lost time, but certainly they're changing their attitude now. They're more investing into the electric cars. But why I'm saying that, the data that we have, we need to be reliable, you know, that has to be reliable. Data has to be reliable, otherwise, and it has to be available. We're talking about the data protection, but also I'm talking about the sharing of the data. There are certain data that needs to be shared, otherwise we're going to run into a trouble. We'll give you an example. Government tries to control, not to control, but analyze the prices of social. There are a group of goods that are very important for the socially important products. Okay, there are 19 categories of them. So, like for example, sugar, potato, the petrol, and etc. It's an index. And what happens is that the government does not know why the prices are changing, and have no idea how it's changing. Even though that we are among the top of the digitalized countries in the world, in the Asia, blah, blah, blah. But we do not know how to change, how to see that data. Because nobody is sharing that data, everybody's holding. So the traders, they say, okay, it's my data, I'm not going to share it with anyone. Banks, they have that information, they don't share that information. Tax collectors, I mean, the tax authorities, they don't share that information. And they do not have the same structure of that data. So the master data management, for example, becomes more important for the government as a topic. Nobody heard about that term before, but it becomes important for the government. We have to have a master data, the policies that will be available to compare the one product with another. So yeah, well, that is becoming very important for the governments. All of a sudden, we talked about the transit capacity of Kazakhstan. I don't know if you heard about that. We have had a Singaporean president here recently. I actually flew with some of the delegation from Singapore. They are playing very key role on the transit capacity of not only Kazakhstan, but of the Central Asia as well, because they know how to earn money on the transit capacity. Singapore is a tiny country. Well, it's not a country, it's a city, yeah. I mean, it's not a city, it's an island, yeah. Yeah. They don't have even water source. we're saying, okay, we have a third pole with a huge, the ice on top of it, but it's going to melt away at some point if we keep doing that. But the Singapore, they don't have water. They import their water from neighboring countries and they recycle their own water. However, they are earning a lot of money from the transit capacity that they have. And we are looking at them and we are learning from them on how we're going to build our transit capacity. We're talking about the digital Silkway, but the old Silkway was there for a reason. And we're trying to use that capacity again, building, using our railroads and thanks to Chinese, the BRI, the initiative we had, we built most of the infrastructure in terms of the roads, and the trucks are going, and quite in a good amount of trucks going through China, through Kazakhstan, from China through Kazakhstan to Europe nowadays, through Caspian Sea and further through Azerbaijan and furthermore, even though that the Russian route is closed now. We talked about the sanctions. Talked about sanctions, yeah. I mean, the Russia is under great pressure. I mean, I worry about the normal, the usual Russian people and the Ukrainian people. I mean, and it's unfortunate they are fighting with each other, but it's like, I can't imagine, for example, us, the Kazakhs and Kyrgyz and Uzbek people fighting with each other. It's like them, they are fighting with each other and influenced by great politics, great power, maybe. I'm not going to go into that. However, because of that, they are under, Russia is under sanction, and we are under always constant threat of the secondary sanctions, because they cannot buy the technology anymore. And this technology can go through us, technically, because we don't have orders. So that sanction can impact us as well. When the Iran sanction impacts us less, but we have also that even the trade war between the US and China, that impacts us as well. So we are part of the global world that will that will impact us. We talked about that as well. Well, the one thing that we did not talk much, but I would actually, I would not forget about it. The populism, the availability of tools for sharing information, for sharing ideas. I have a brother who lives deep in Kazakh village. He's just a school teacher. He has no authority whatsoever on village life. However, he has access to Facebook. And he managed to install in that village, I mean, the recycling point for the batteries. Okay, because he kept shouting on the Facebook about that issue. He kept shouting about it. He kept tagging all the Hakims and the mayors of the village. He started the tagging from the Hakim of the village, then the district, then the whole state, and he even managed to befriend himself with the prime minister. He tags prime minister whenever there is a problem, and all of a sudden he becomes all important person in that village, in that the groups of village, because people come to him if there is a problem, and he asks him, can you post about that issue? And he gets an attention, and everybody tries to fix that problem. He sometimes abuses, let's be honest. But however, we did not have such power or such platform before. I mean, the Arab Revolution started probably, because of its availability of such platform, but we're taking advantage of such platforms nowadays. And when we talk about the availability of platforms, then all of a sudden, the language becomes an important role, because the Kazakh people, the percentage of people who speaks in Kazakh, I don't know what, 70%? Anybody knows the numbers? Only 70% of people in Kazakhstan, they speak in Kazakh. But almost all of them speaks Russian. Because if you look into the internet, the availability of the information in Kazakh language is very limited. Our colleagues from Kyrgyz Republic, they were talking about the availability of information in Russian. It's a lot. But availability of the information in English, it's much more. So the learning language is not also a necessity, but also, you know, without that the managing or without learning the language, you cannot access that information, and it becomes in a black box. You don't have that, and you have to take into account all of that information when we're working with the government data, and that's our job. I mean, you know, work. That's, you know, I'm responsible only for the small part, but I'm glad to see that the government, it takes advantage of that information, and also the academic world is also looking really seriously into how that information is used. Yeah, by the way, I just wanted to mention, Hugo, was it you who mentioned about?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, about.
Please do not use anything starts with D, because our neighbors, they started. That was a reason for the starting a war.
Okay. Oh, it wasn't broadcasted. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Just
don't share that. Okay. However, the last year in January taught us very important lesson, where we have to make sure our data. I mean, you know, when the things happened in Almaty, in the bigger cities, the information became very important. At that time I was abroad. I relied on some Ukrainian sources actually on what is happening in the country, because country was locked. Country was in a complete blackout. We were worried about what's going to happen to our data servers, because somebody said, okay, we need to crash these data centers. If we crash these data centers, they're going to, you know, they will not know about our credit history. And they were really, you know, people trying to identify where the data centers were located. They did not realize that data centers had the backups as well. But all of a sudden, they're having a secondary data center for the main DC. It's not enough to have a secondary one. It has to be geographically in a different place, because, you know, Almaty is, for example, prone for earthquakes. So, you know, probably our secondary data center should be located in somewhere else. I know that in Kyrgyzstan, for example, seismological activities are quite high as well. I'm not sure about Uzbekistan, but you know, they have their own challenge. Tajikistan is also in a very, very geographically unstable area. So, you know, you need to take into account when you're building an infrastructure, this kind of geographically aspect as well. So we're talking about the geographical, political, the cultural aspects, the language, when you're building a digital solution. And you need to take into account the age as well, because different people are, you know, solve the problems in a different way. So these are the aspects that we're talking. That's a conclusion that I'm making to myself, that taking with me from all of the wonderful presentations, all of your insights, all of your ideas. We're doing okay with the time. One thing that slightly off topic. One thing that I'm very passionate about is, well, actually two things. One is photography, and the other one is wild tulips. Wild tulips, I grew up in a small village, and wild tulips used to grow outside of my village. When I moved to UK, I lived in UK for 15 years. When I was homesick, I learned that the tulips gave me, you know, the nostalgic events, the Holland, the Dutch tulips. I used to go with my gut. In Europe, lots of people grow tulips. But then I learned actually these tulips originate from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Iran, from Turkmenistan. I'm not sure. Well, I'm sure they grow the wild tulips in Turkmenistan as well. In Crimea, the wild tulips, they originated from here. And I started, you know, exploring. Okay, what happened? How come these wild tulips ended up in Europe? Actually, it was the Silk Way actually brought that wild tulips to the Europe. All the caravans moving from all of this, from across this land, from transporting their spices from China to Europe. All the people who owned the caravan, they sold it probably the wild tulips, and they took the bulbs. They grew from bulbs. It's like the Lukvica with them, and they started growing in some other places. It ended up in Turkey. Osman Empire, they liked the Sultan, so they liked the tulip very much. It was a kind of, the almost sacred plant. The European traders, they saw from in the gardens of the sultans, and they took it with them. And the tulips ended up and it became one of the very important part of the Dutch economy. Why I'm giving that example? Because that Silk Road, that trade, allowed the tulip to from the wild tulip that grows in every country that we have is very important part of the world economy. Do you know that the first the financial pyramid was built on the tulipomania? It was the first financial pyramid built on tulip bulbs, and it almost crashed the Dutch economy at that time. And now we're trying to build on the same road, digital Silk Road. We're trying to take advantage of that. And when I look back into that history, maybe I'm too romantic. I try to think about it, why that Silk Road was successful, why that it migrated not only spices, but tulips into the other places. It's probably, for example, if you look back into our history, Kazakhstan, Kazakh, and actually almost all of the people who live in this land, we consist of different tribes. We almost always fight with each other. We almost always, they steal cattle from each other. Even nowadays, they do that. But nevertheless, when it came to the trade, when it came to the Silk Way, we were able to get together and come to an agreement and say, we never steal from the caravan, because if we steal, that caravan will stop. We will not have that trade road. Probably that happened at that time, and they had that kind of agreement. And I'm glad that we have the academic session here when different people come from different places. And when it comes to digitalization, we have something in common. We agree on that one, and we share that knowledge with each other. And we say, okay, we need to protect that. We need to work together on building that. I think the digital Silk Way, with that, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we are repeating that step that our ancestors did. We are agreeing when it comes to the digitalization. We are agreeing we have something in common, and we come together and make an agreement that we need to protect the data. We need to have a sovereignty. We need to share that knowledge. We need to have a literacy, digital literacy, different groups, between different groups. We need to use it properly. We need to analyze that data. We need to look into what is happening in neighboring countries and learn from each other on digitalization aspects. In fact, last month, with the help of IMF, we had again, similar kind of session, but only the Ministry of Finance digital officers get together. We shared the information on how we're doing it, what we're doing it, so they could learn from each other. Yeah, the Kazakhstan is ahead of us in certain aspects, but there are definitely some things that we can learn from each other. So we are having these kind of platforms where we come together and restoring that. We are actually working on that digital Silk Way that our the friends, Elisa, Oyuna, I am trying to building that kind of platform for us to get together and discuss and share that knowledge. And I'd like to thank them again for that opportunity. And let's have more of these kind of discussions and learn from each other. Thank you.
Well, thank you. These were wonderful words to conclude our sessions. And do you think we have a few minutes for Q&A?
Absolutely. I would love to have Q&A. Yes.
So please, anyone has any questions?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I think it was really interesting to listen to. So, for example, when we are doing some environmental projects, we had to talk about environmental risk assessment. So how do you think if, for example, if we implemented some digital project, maybe we also have to think about digital risk assessment? Because, for example, I'm working with negative consequences of this digitalization process always, because like cyber crimes, as you mentioned, scammers, etc., etc. But how can we just introduce this maybe idea to make the digital risk assessment before starting any digitalization process in any area? What do you think? Especially in the financial area, it's maybe very common, but not in maybe other areas.
Unfortunately, I don't know well enough the how IT projects run in Kyrgyzstan, in Kyrgyz Republic. Sorry, you call it officially Kyrgyz Republic nowadays. Yeah, Kyrgyz Republic. But in Kazakhstan, what we have is that for any application that we do, there are requirements that we need to do in order to assess. In order to launch the system, we need to do the assessment system, and that assessment part is controlled by a different government body, separate government body from the organization who actually is building that solution, and they do the risk assessment. However, they do only the infrastructural risk assessment, whether if somebody unauthorized has access to that data, if the, for example, password is changed in every 40 days, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They can check only the infrastructure, basic layout of the solution. They cannot look into the function because most of the time they do not understand that function of that application. So we have to rely on human knowledge and skills in order to assess the risks that you're talking about. So, for example, we work a lot with the tax data. So there is the tax codex, codex, that we have to use when it comes to the protecting data, because our culture of our organization is that when it comes to the tax data, it's something sacred. We do not touch, we do not share. So that culture is embedded already in our organization. So, I guess, we can build lots of laws and regulations around it, but if we do not use these regulations on everyday life, it's going to be useless. So on the infrastructure side, and I should answer to your questions, the government body, it's actually the Gosударственный-технический state technical service. They control, they check everything. They do regular checks on the infrastructure is not penetrated or is not valuable. But on the functional side of the solutions, we rely on organizations, their own experience and competence and culture on protecting that data. Yes, please.
Thanks so much, Mr. Tuleshov. Very interesting presentation. I really like your analogy of that to have a successful digital Silk Road, we need to ensure the safety of the data that passes through the Silk Road. My question is related to the point that you made earlier about the mining and the cheap electricity. So, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, electricity is sold actually below the cost of production, and the government does not have the capacity to make the price even kind of to recover the cost. But then you have these externalities that all these illegal mining farms siphoning off all the electricity, and we have blackouts and brownouts. But my question is more broader, maybe given your experience. What do you think is the future of cryptocurrencies? Is there a future of cryptocurrencies?
I have my own personal opinion, but it's not necessarily the mining. Hugo, I am sorry, it's not going to be positive for you, but it's going to be good for your research. I promise that. The crypto mining does not generate anything except that something. You cannot eat that. You cannot touch it. You cannot keep it. You can sell it, but again, it's not something that tangible. But for Kazakhstan, for the economy, it does not generate any job. It uses electricity, and in our case, mostly the electricity made by fossil fuels, and that's it. Yeah, we can take advantage of that as an economy, but it brought us something different that we need to look at it. The crypto mining brought us technology, brought us blockchain technology that we're using for various other purposes. the CBDC in Kazakhstan is doing really well. I think, we're doing it very good. There was a good pilot of the CBDC here last year, and they're ready to launch it later this year. Main use of the digital tenge in Kazakhstan is you can actually mark the currency, mark the tenge, and you can actually control it for example, for the social payments. So lots of, the social payments that government make, we do not know, I mean, if the people are using it really to buy pills that they need, or they're using it to buy vodka. Okay. But if we can mark that currency, we can actually make sure that they actually using it for the social purposes that government is giving them. So, yeah, the crypto mining has no benefit from one hand, but it generated a technology that can be used for real social benefit in some other areas. So it's really difficult to say that this is bad, this is good, because you never know what it's going to end up. So that's the short answer, I guess. I'm afraid that, there is no definitive yes or no, but that's how government, that's how I think about it. Okay. Any more questions?
Yeah, I like your last remark very much. You said that you're wondering why Silk Wave is successful from a historical perspective. So I really want to applaud that you think that way, because indeed I think that international trade at the end of the day is reciprocal, it's mutually beneficial. So if throughout history the Silk Way was a success, why not a success in the future? So I really appreciate your confidence. And I guess that you personally will play a role throughout the process. I mean, from your own perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, we all play a role in it. I mean, with governments, different organizations, academics, the practical people, I mean, the researchers, NGOs, I mean, everybody plays a role in that. But I truly believe in that. I mean, I think we should all believe in that. Otherwise, for example, when we're talking about the dependency about the hardware, at some point, we all depended on Nokia and Ericsson on their phones. They were really reliable. Yeah, but where they are now, where is Nokia? Ericsson is still there, but then we depended on, we depend on Apple on these phones. Yeah, well, there is an alternative. But again, if we're going to be scared and say that, no, we should not go for Huawei, or Huawei has a technology, we need to take advantage of that. We are on the trade road. We are all the traders on the big, the caravan that are passing through our country. We need to take advantage of that, not to be scared.
I think don't be scared, but be thoughtful could be
Absolutely.
the summation of this 2 days.
You put it really well. I mean,
That's too kind of you, but thank you again. Please join me in thanking our keynote speaker and thank you everybody for coming, for presenting, for engaging in this discussion. Yes, let's continue the conversation at a time when conversation is not the favorite way of, finding or solving disagreements.
excellent.
So thank you again, and